There is a single habit that silently undoes most of the inner work people ever attempt, and Neville Goddard named the cure for it in one deliberate word. What if the reason your assumptions keep collapsing has nothing to do with how well you imagine and everything to do with how long you stay? Watch what almost everyone does. They close their eyes, they enter the state of the wish already fulfilled, and for a few honest minutes it feels real. The relief is genuine. The scene lands, and then they open their eyes and step straight back out, back into the old self, to check whether the world has caught up yet. They keep visiting. They tour the fulfilled wish like a house they might one day buy, admire the rooms, and then drive home to the address they already have. The visit was lovely. It changed nothing, because a visit is designed to end. By the end of this video, you will understand why one move, stepping back out to check, quietly cancels your results, and what Neville asked you to do instead. His word was not entering, his word was dwelling. Not visiting the state and returning to your ordinary self, but taking up residence in it, living from inside it as your normal address, staying long after the visit would have ended. Skeptical of that? Good. Keep the skepticism and aim it at the right place. The problem was never that you could not reach the state. You reach it constantly. It was that you kept moving back out and then blamed your imagination for a door you never walked through to stay.
Picture two people holding the exact same assumption. Both want the same outcome. Both can imagine it with the same clarity. On the inside, in the moment of imagining, they look identical. The difference shows up entirely in what they do next. The first person imagines, feels it, and then returns to the world to see if it worked. She checks her phone. She reads the room. She measures the gap between what she assumed and what is actually in front of her, and the gap is still there, so she quietly concludes that nothing happened. She is a visitor. She dropped in on the state and went home. The second person imagines the same thing, and then simply stays, not by straining, not forcing the feeling to stay hot, but by refusing to move his address back. He goes about his day as the person for whom the wish is already true. He answers his emails as that person. He orders his coffee as that person. When the evidence is missing, he does not treat that as news, because a resident does not need daily proof that he lives in his own home. He is a resident. He lives there now. Same imagining, opposite outcome. And the reason is not talent, not visualization skill, not how vividly either of them pictured it. The reason is that one of them left and one of them stayed. Everything Neville taught about states turns on that difference, and it is the difference nobody tells you about when they teach you to imagine.
Here is the correction most people never receive. You have been told over and over that manifesting is about getting into the state, feel it real, generate the emotion, reach the vividness. And so when it does not work, you assume you did not reach the state well enough, and you go looking for a better technique. But look honestly at your own track record. You have entered the state hundreds of times. You have felt the relief of the wish fulfilled again and again, in the shower, on the drive home, in the last minutes before sleep. Entering is the easy part. Most people can do it on command, given a quiet room and a few minutes. If entering were the whole game, you would have everything you have ever imagined several times over. The fact that you do not is the clue. It points away from the door and toward how long you stayed once you were through it. So the diagnosis has to change. The reason your assumption never held was not that you could not reach it. It was that you kept reaching it and then letting go, over and over, entering and exiting, treating the state as somewhere you visit rather than somewhere you live. This reframes everything. If entering is easy and remaining is hard, then all your effort has been aimed at the wrong target. You have been polishing the doorway and never walking in to stay. Neville's whole teaching on residence exists to move your attention from the entrance to the address. To understand dwelling, you have to understand what Neville meant by a state, because it is stranger and more useful than it sounds. In The Power of Awareness, published in 1952, he laid out a picture of the mind that reorganizes how you see your whole situation. You are not a fixed person moving through fixed circumstances. You are consciousness moving from state to state, the way a person moves from room to room in a great house. There is a state of wealth and a state of poverty, a state of being wanted and a state of being overlooked, a state of health, a state of resentment, a state of confidence. These states already exist. You do not create them, you occupy them. And whatever state you occupy expresses itself. It hardens into circumstance, into mood, into the events that seem to arrive from outside. The man who lives in the state of poverty will meet the conditions of poverty wherever he goes, not because he is unlucky, but because the state he is living in is projecting them. Move him to a new city and the same conditions reassemble around him, because he carried the state along in the only luggage that matters. This is why the whole game is about which state you reside in, not which state you occasionally visit. A traveler passing through a country does not take on its citizenship. You can pass through the state of the fulfilled wish for 10 minutes a day and remain, legally and practically, a citizen of the state you actually live in. Residence, not tourism, decides what expresses.
So, dwelling is a change of address. Neville chose the language of residence on purpose, and it repays taking literally. To dwell somewhere is to receive your mail there, to wake up there, to answer the door there, to call it home without thinking about it. That is the relationship he wanted you to have with the assumed state. In Awakened Imagination, from 1954, he pressed the same point. The wish fulfilled is not a passing act of fancy you perform and abandon. It is a dwelling place. You inhabit it. You think from it rather than about it. And the test of whether you truly dwell somewhere is beautifully simple. It is where you are when you are not trying. That last part is everything. Anyone can feel wealthy during a visualization. The resident feels quietly wealthy while stuck in traffic, while doing the dishes, while waiting in a line that is not moving. The state has become the floor he stands on rather than a mood he summons. It runs underneath the day instead of interrupting it. You are not performing the assumption anymore. You are living inside it, the way you live inside your own name without rehearsing it each morning. Which raises a question worth sitting with before we go on. Think about the outcome you have been imagining. Are you visiting that state, dropping in and leaving, or have you actually moved in? In one honest sentence, tell me in the comments what the resident version of you does differently tomorrow morning, not the visitor, the one who already lives there.
Dwelling is easy to confuse with two other things you may already practice, so let me set it cleanly apart from both, because the confusion is where people lose it. Living in the end gives you a single scene. The two chairs gives you a switch. Dwelling gives you the staying. Living in the end is about one implied moment, the imaginal act you replay. The handshake, the phone call, the ring on the finger, the scene that would only be happening if the wish were already true. That is entry. It is the door you walk through. Dwelling is what you do in the house after the scene ends and the credits stop rolling. The two chairs is about the deliberate move from one self-concept to another, physically getting up out of the old self and sitting down as the new one. That is the switch, the crossing over. It is a magnificent way to arrive, but arriving is still not the same as living there. Most people perform the switch and then, an hour later, drift back into the chair they came from without noticing they got up. The move was real. It just did not stick because nothing was asked of them afterward. Dwelling is the stage after arrival, and its entire content is permanence. The scene gets you in. The switch moves you across. Dwelling is the long, quiet business of staying put once you have crossed. It is making the new state the ordinary background of your life, instead of a place you keep re-entering because you keep falling out of it.
Neville had a precise standard for how long you stay, and it is not a number of minutes or days. You remain in the assumed state until it becomes natural, until it stops feeling like a costume and starts feeling like your own skin, until the wish fulfilled is no longer exciting, because a thing stops being exciting the moment it becomes simply true. That is the marker he gave in The Power of Awareness. The state has taken hold when it feels normal, unremarkable, almost boring. When you no longer need to check whether you feel it, the way you do not check whether you believe your own name. The excitement of imagining is the sign you have not arrived. The calm of assuming is the sign that you have. Naturalness is what makes the state express. A state you visit is a guest, and guests leave. A state you have naturalized has your citizenship, and it starts to project outward as circumstance. This is slow, patient work, and it does not photograph well, which is exactly why almost no one does it. There is no dramatic moment to post, no breakthrough to screenshot. There is only the quiet accumulation of days spent being the person for whom it is already so.
So you stop asking the anxious question, is it working yet? And you start living from the quiet assumption that it already is so. You let the feeling settle from a spike into a baseline. You wear the state until you forget you are wearing anything at all. And then, and only then, does the outer world begin to arrange itself to match.
Now we arrive at the test, the exact moment where residents and visitors part ways, and where nearly everyone bolts. You assume the state. You begin to settle in. And then the world shows you, plainly and specifically, the opposite of what you assumed. The discouraging text arrives. The week goes quiet. The number in the account does not move. You look in the mirror and it has not changed. The 3D world holds up the contradiction directly in front of your face and asks in effect, "Are you sure?" And everything in you wants to step out of the state and deal with the facts, because the facts feel urgent and the state feels like pretending. That pull is the strongest force working against you, and it does not feel like an enemy. It feels like being reasonable, like finally facing the truth. This is the hinge of the entire practice. Contradiction is not a signal to step out and reassess. It is not new information about whether your assumption is working. It is the test of whether you actually live there, and it will arrive precisely because you have started to assume, not in spite of it. Understand what the contradiction actually is. It is the outer world showing you the momentum of the old state, the state you are moving out of. It is the previous tenant's mail still arriving at the address, addressed to a person you are no longer being. A visitor reads that mail and panics and moves back. A resident sees the old name on the envelope and sets it aside because he knows who lives here now.
So the discipline, the whole of it, is refusing to be evicted by the evidence. When the contradiction comes, you do not leave the state to go handle the facts. You stay put and let the facts be the last thing to catch up. Because in Neville's order of things, the state comes first and the world comes after. This is the opposite of what feels responsible. It feels responsible to react to the evidence, to adjust your assumption to fit what is currently true, to be realistic. But realism here just means letting the old state keep its lease forever. Every time you step out to check, you renew that lease. Every time you stay, you let it expire. Staying does not mean denying what is in front of you. The resident sees the low number in the account as clearly as anyone. He simply does not move his address because of it. He grants the fact its reality on its own level and declines to hand it authority over the state he now lives in. The fact is true. It is also the past, still finishing its arrival, the tail end of a state he has already left. You can look straight at a contradiction and stay exactly where you live. Seeing it and obeying it are two different acts. You have felt this pull before, the pull to abandon the state the second the world pushes back. That pull is the work this channel keeps returning to. If it is landing, subscribe, and we keep going together. Because the pushback is never the failure. Leaving because of the pushback is the only failure there is.
There is a quiet order to how a new state becomes a new life, and getting the order right removes most of the anxiety. The state changes first. Your inner conversation changes next. The running talk in your head starts speaking from the assumption instead of against it, and the outer world changes last, always last. Most people demand the sequence in reverse. They want the outer world to change first so that they can then feel safe assuming the state. But that is asking the reflection to move before the face does. Neville taught that the world is a mirror, forever reflecting what you are being, and a mirror never leads. It can only report, faithfully and a little late, what is already true of you on the inside. So you let the outer world be the last to know. You live in the assumed state while the evidence still says otherwise. You treat the delay not as failure, but as the ordinary lag between an inner cause and its outer echo. The gap between assuming and seeing is not proof it is not working. It is the shape of how it works. Every created thing has this lag built into it, the pause between the word and the fact. The resident has simply made peace with living inside that pause without flinching. This is why the resident is not disturbed by an empty-looking week. He is not waiting for permission from the facts. He assumes the feeling of the wish fulfilled, to use Neville's own words, and keeps that feeling as his baseline. The world can do the slow work of catching up. He knows the mirror will report it eventually,
because he has stopped asking the mirror to go first.
So here is where this leaves you, and it is simpler and harder than any technique. Your problem was never getting into the state. You proved that 100 times over. Your problem was that you kept treating the assumed state as somewhere to visit, and then you moved back out the moment the world failed to applaud. The fix is not a better visualization. It is a change of residence. You make the assumed state the place you now live from, the address you answer to, the floor you stand on when nothing in particular is happening. And when the contradiction comes, and it will come, you recognize it as the old tenant's mail, and you refuse to move back. Not by fighting the evidence, just by staying home while it sorts itself out. That refusal, quiet and unspectacular, is the entire discipline. Enter the state, yes, but then stay. Stay until it becomes natural, until it stops being exciting because it has become true. Stay until the version of you who lives there is simply the version of you who is. Let the feelings settle into a baseline. Let the world be the last to know. And whatever the evidence says, do not pack your bags and leave the moment the room has not yet changed. Entering was always the easy part. Remaining is the practice, and it is the whole of it. If this is the work you want to go deeper into, subscribe and stay with it here.